Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Odd and Untold. This is episode 3. If you've listened to the first 2 episodes, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it. I know some of you have been subscribing and following us on social media, so that's awesome. Thank you so much. So this episode, I'm going to do something a little different. The last two episodes, I spoke to Seth Breedlove from Small Town Monsters. This episode, I'm not interviewing anybody, just myself. I just wanted to first of all, thank everybody for listening. Thank everybody for subscribing, and talk a little bit about what brought me to this podcast. I used to run a site called the Occult section, and that was a blog that I started about 10, 12 years ago. A little fuzzy on when it actually started because we started it with another paranormal group. But it was a blog that I had started mainly starting off reviewing books on the paranormal. And the Occult section is what bookstores used to call the section, which is now the New Age section, but it had books on Bigfoot and UFOs and ghosts. And so the blog was initially set up for that, to sort of review books and movies about the paranormal. That sort of grew into a paranormal news site. So we would find articles on the paranormal and comment on them, usually with a sense of humor. We were a very skeptical sort of paranormal group, and it was easy to sort of pick apart a lot of news stories where there was a photo of orbs or a black smudge in the forest that was supposedly Bigfoot. And that site grew very fast, and it overwhelmed me, not in a bad way, but it was just so great to have such explosive growth. We were getting tons of hits. We were getting lots of media inquiries. It was great. I loved it. Writing lots of articles. My wife was contributing. Some of my friends contributed. We had other people from around the world who wanted to contribute. So we had guest writers here and there. My good friend Courtney Maroc from Honjons would contribute sometimes. So it was really great to just have that experience and write, and to have so much attention on the blog, to have so many hits and comments and discussions. And it opened a lot of doors for me. I got on to a lot of television shows. I was on The Unexplained with William Shatner. I was on Love, Lust, and the Paranormal. I was on Dark Matters, local news stations, NBC News, New York One. We were in local newspapers, the New York Times, the Post, and a lot of places like that. So it was a phenomenal experience for me. It opened a lot of doors. At our height, we were probably getting 20 to 25,000 hits a month. So that was great. And then about a year or so ago, year and a half ago, Google changed its algorithms and sort of started delisting our site. And that was mainly because we were quoting other articles. So instead of just writing an article based on another article, I would sort of have a little introduction. I'd have the article itself. I always gave credit to the source and the author. But we didn't want people sort of leaving our site to go read the article and never coming back. So I always kind of just in block text put our source article in there, then made my comments around it, usually with some funny photos, something photoshopped, a lot of Muppets. I don't know why Muppets were my thing, but they were. Anyway, that algorithm sort of punished websites who did that, and my site did that a lot. Mainly my fault. So that was a big part of it. So it sort of dropped us in the rankings a lot. I also had a plugin on my website, technical issue, that basically, and this is for the programmers and web designers out there, it no-indexed my site, which in layman's terms basically tells Google, don't list this in your search results. Like, it's just not on Google anymore. So my site, which had crawled and climbed its way up the rankings for many years, was taken off Google essentially due to a plugin. I had no idea it did it. It just removed me from Google altogether. So I spent the better part of a year trying to get back on Google. I changed all my SEO, search engine optimization. I went back and started changing a lot of these posts to get rid of the quoted article, which they consider plagiarism, even though I credited the source. It wasn't working. It was a slow slog. My articles were showing up in Google again, but the rankings were so low. I was showing up on page 35, which nobody goes past page 1. If you're on page 2, maybe you'll get seen, but if you're not in the first, the top 10, your website's not getting seen. So I dropped from about 20 to 25,000 hits a month to about 800, which is terrible. So I was really struggling. I was really struggling to get the site back. I was posting more. I was posting more original content, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't really getting me the hits that I used to get. So after a long discussion with my wife, who is wiser than I am, she pointed out a few issues that I had. First, the name of the site, the occult section. We noticed that I wasn't showing up at my job. I wasn't showing up at her job. I wasn't showing up at a lot of places. I started talking to people, and site was blocked at their job. Site is blocked at my job. Site is blocked at school. Mainly, I believe, because it had occult in the name, the occult section. So it was occult. And the word occult just was not Google friendly or search engine friendly or IT friendly for most companies and schools. So I was realizing that a lot of people, when they're searching, they're on Facebook during the day, they're on Instagram during the day, they want to click on one of my links, it's going to be blocked through whatever provider they're using, if they're at work, if they're at school. So she suggested a name change. That was part 1 of her idea. And I'm giving her full credit for this because I was very resistant to this. Part 2 of her idea was that blogs are sort of a dying breed. And I hate to say that because I know a lot of people still do read, but the wave of the future is podcasts. The wave of the future is Instagram and TikTok. Little shout out to my friend Dan Nicotera. He's on TikTok. So it really came to the conclusion with her prodding that I had to shift gears. I had to sort of change what I was doing and reassess and start a podcast. And as I mentioned, I've been on TV before. I've done interviews before. It's not really something I'm fully comfortable with. I'm a much better writer than I am a live speaker. So it was something that I was very nervous to do. It was something new for me to do this on a regular basis when writing and photoshopping funny photos is really my jam. And so I was resistant, and but I knew she was right. It was one of those things where I realized that I spent a year pouring money and time and effort into the blog, and it was never coming back. It just was not going to reach those halcyon days that I once was at. So I figured I'd try a crack at this, try my hand at this. And so here I am. First guest was Seth Breedlove. And I was over the moon about that, because that was just, he was a guy that I admired, I respected. I mentioned to him that he sort of got me back into the paranormal, because with everything going on just with my blog, and in the world of the paranormal, just the television shows and the orbs and the woo people in the Bigfoot community, I kind of lost my passion for it until I found his movies. And so forever be grateful for him, not just for his movies, but also for coming on, being my first guest, and for talking to me for so long. I mean, I asked him for like 30 to 45 minutes, and we ended up talking for just under 2 hours. Phenomenal guest, such a cool guy, so nice, so gracious, and I was so nervous to interview him, but like once we started talking, it just felt like talking to an old friend, and he's just so cool. So many cool stories. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, episode 1 and 2, go check him out, because he's just got stories for days, and yeah, even with 2 hours, I barely scratched the surface about what I wanted to talk to him about. So now moving forward, this podcast will be weekly, hopefully. Ideally, I want to speak more to the average person. For me, I love speaking to my friends, my family, my coworkers, anybody who's got a paranormal story that's not really well known. And I mentioned this to Seth in the last episodes, how, the famous stuff is great. Patterson Gimlin footage. Let me say that again. Patterson Gimlin footage, the Roswell incident, these very famous events in the paranormal or ufology or cryptozoology. They've just been kind of talked about to death. And I don't really want to go over them too often. I mean, we will touch on them, of course. You can't really talk about this stuff without mentioning them. But I really want to focus on the day-to-day stories that people have, just the average person who's going into the woods and seeing something, or looking up into the sky and seeing something. Like I said, friends, family, acquaintances, friends of friends, anybody I know or who wants to come on the show and share a story. Those are the stories that really appeal to me. It's just the people who aren't really into the paranormal, who experience something paranormal, or who aren't into Bigfoot, but they're out camping or they're out for a hike and they come across something that they can't explain otherwise. It's Bigfoot in their mind anyway. So I definitely want to speak to people like that. I will try to have some paranormal people on from time to time, because there's a lot of people in the community I do want to speak to who are sort of up and coming or just doing really interesting stuff. Again, like Seth was just awesome. He's doing so much for this field. But the main focus is really going to be on non-paranormal people who've had paranormal experiences. I have a YouTube channel, and these episodes are on there. I also do a subset of episodes called Adirondacks, which is about my odd experiences in the Adirondacks. So it's Odd Adirondacks, and mush those words together to get Adirondacks. Odd Adirondacks. And so some of those videos will be popping up soon. There's 2 up there already. There's going to be more because I just got back from a camping trip. I'm not really shaved here. We had a weird experience this weekend, which I hope to talk about in the future with the guys I experienced it with, Josh, my friend Josh Diaz, and Dustin, who came on the trip with us. And so that's where we're headed. I'm trying to keep this episode a little bit shorter because it's just me. But I did want to give some framework there for where Odd and Untold came from. It actually sprang from a book idea. I was going to interview a lot of my friends and family who've had stories and write a book, but I figured this might be a more interesting medium. This way they're telling it in their own words. People can hear their voice. They can see them on the screen if they choose to come on video. And I think it'll just be a much more interesting medium than a book. I mean, I love books. I love reading. No offense to anybody who writes books or reads books, because I love reading and I admire authors tremendously, but this was the way I wanted to go. So here we are. Next week, I will be talking to my buddy Josh Diaz, who I go camping with a lot in the Adirondacks, and we're going to talk about a creature that we saw. We're not sure what it was. Bear, Bigfoot, a lot of ambiguity to it, but a lot of weirdness too. We're very pragmatic, kind of skeptical believers, and we're pretty sure it was a bear, but there are some aspects of it that lead us to believe maybe it wasn't a bear. So I'm going to be talking to Josh. That'll be next week, and I got some other cool guests coming up, some of my friends, and so look forward to that. If you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email at jason@oddanduntold.com. And I'd love to speak to you about your paranormal story. It doesn't have to be even paranormal. It could just be something odd or unusual that you've experienced. I have a lot of friends who have had experiences with things that are not really quantifiable or definable or easily categorized. It's not quite a UFO, or it's not quite Bigfoot, or it's not quite a ghost. So there's kind of these in between gray areas, and that really interests me as well. So if that's something you have some experience with, I'd love to hear it. Again, the email address is jason@oddanduntold.com. You can also go to our website, oddanduntold.com. We're on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything is Odd and Untold. So just look us up, you'll be able to find us. Thanks everybody for tuning into this episode. Like I said, I know it's a little bit shorter. It's just me talking, not nearly as interesting, but it gives everybody a little insight into how I got here, why I'm here, and what I hope to accomplish. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.